Four Spheres of Knowledge Creation. The Causal Principles by René Holmbjerg Bøtker. Chapter 4. Levels of Existence. The foundation for social scientific progress is in many ways based on the Cartesian foundation of extension as a representation of reality. With Leibniz, extension as a divisible entity becomes central to the way that we structure our perspectives on what reality is and how knowledge is structured. Perhaps this is because extension is the foundation of human experience, or should we say, apperception. Extension as such is fundamental to what it means to be a human in a material world. Where Descartes used extension and the method of division to determine a foundation for human knowledge, Leibniz was attempting to use division to gaze into what the world is beyond the human experience. Where Descartes searched for a method to reach the end of it all, Leibniz searched for the beginning of it all. In that sense, the mathematical Leibniz is more of a physicist than a social scientist. The mathematical Leibniz is a representation which is important to understand for the reader of this book. Namely, that Leibniz was a polymath in the truest sense of the word. His work is difficult to understand and read, as there is never just one Leibniz in action. There are many different perspectives, which are often misaligned. Furthermore, some perspectives are written for a public, some are written for academics. The religious and mathematical Leibniz often conflict with each other, which has led to many misunderstandings through time. Therefore, it is necessary to denote that this book is an interpretation of the mathematical Leibniz. In addition to this, an important issue needs to be addressed, namely that the property of potential objects in much of Leibniz's writing is assigned religious differentiation of property. Since this approach has been abandoned, and the fact that extension and not property was Leibniz's primary concern, I believe that it is important to inform the reader that the differentiation of property is assigned to Schopenhauer's argument, namely that whatever is not differentiated in the phenomenal world must be undifferentiated. Schopenhauer argued that it is the same will that exists in all phenomenal objects. Although he is monistic and adamant on the fact that there is no multiplicity in the will, we see an interesting perspective. If this idea is projected through the pluralistic ontological framework of Leibniz. In Leibniz's vocabulary, this would mean that the will consists of an infinite amount of indivisible, undifferentiated points, and that each set of indivisible, undifferentiated points contains the same infinite quantity, regardless of its phenomenal extension. A more logical and mathematical proposition than the religious proposition by Leibniz. Therefore, we will use this argument as a substitute for the religious explanation of Leibniz. The result of this ontological framework is a system of quantities and relations, which defines the levels of existence in between the entirety of the finite phenomenal reality and the infinite noumenal reality. The noumenal world, the world beyond human experience, is often referred to as the noumenal world. It is an entity that exists independently of the human experience. It is the noumenal world that lays the foundation of the phenomenally experienced world of human apperception. The noumenal reality is a world that consists of an infinite number of indivisible points. A collection of indivisible points represents a potential object. The indivisible points compose the property of that potential object. The property of an object represents the possible interactions that an object can have with other objects. Within the potential object exists an infinite number of indivisible points. This in turn means that the property of the potential object represents an infinite number of possible interactions. The interacting potential objects become finite and material through an actualization process, where a potential object can share a boundary with another potential object and form a phenomenal composite as an actualized object. While it might sound counterintuitive that a collection of indivisible points as a potential object can contain an infinite number of points, It is based on the fact that a number line can contain an infinite number of points, whether the interval is 0 to 1 or 0 to infinity. Therefore, a line can be infinite, while at the same time an interval on that line can contain an infinite number of points. In the same way, a potential object can be a part of an infinite noumenal world of points and still contain an infinite number of points within it. The noumenal world consists of two immaterial levels, where we see indivisible points as the lowest level of noumenal existence and the potential objects as the highest level of noumenal existence. The noumenal world as it really is, beyond our experienced reality, is governed by the pre-established harmony. The pre-established harmony is the structure that enables interaction between potential objects and therefore enables any actualization process. The actualization process is the precedent for the existence of any material object. It is in the actualization process that the border between the noumenal immaterial world and the phenomenal material world is to be found. Between the potential object and the actualized object with the pre-established harmony as the entity that binds everything and everyone together. The phenomenal world. The lowest level of existence in the phenomenal world is the actualized object. The actualized object exists as a finite composite, which is a particular representation of the infinite indivisible points that existed in the potential object before the actualization process. The particular representation of the potential object exists as the finite material actualized object, which we, as human beings, experience in the physical phenomenal world. The phenomenal world is an analog representation of the noumenal world. Therefore, the pre-established harmony acts as an infrastructure for all actualized objects to exist and interact in the phenomenal world. We call this causality. Causality in the phenomenal world is a particular representation of the infinite pre-established harmony. A collection of actualized objects can be perceived as a whole, which is called a set. Both actualized objects and sets exists in two dimensions, namely a spatial and a temporal. The spatial dimension is composed of various actualized objects. The temporal dimension is composed of multiple actualized representations of the same potential object. The entirety of the phenomenal reality exists as the infinite set of all actualized objects, as an aggregation of both the spatial and temporal dimension.